In the shadowed halls of the psyche, the unhealed mother wound does not rest. It weaves itself through the soul's fabric, a silent weaver crafting patterns of pain that masquerade as fate. Carl Jung warned that what remains unconscious directs our lives, and nowhere is this truth more piercing than in the mother wound's subtle reign. When the mother complex lies unexamined, it does not fade. It festers, shaping beliefs, behaviors, and bonds with a quiet ferocity. These are not mere quirks or fleeting sorrows, but archetypal cries, echoes of a soul yearning to be seen. Jung taught that these symptoms are not signs of brokenness, but messages, urgent whispers from the depths, calling for reconciliation with the self. Let us now trace 9 sacred wounds, each a portal to the unconscious, each a map to the healing that awaits. 1. The relentless inner judge. A voice within whispers, sabotage. You are not enough. Your worth is unproven. This is no ordinary doubt, but the internalized echo of the mother's gaze. Conditional, withholding, or absent. It rises in moments of risk, punishing the ego for daring to shine. Jung called this a psychic splinter, a fragment of the mother complex that feeds on the soul's attempts to grow. It is the child within, still seeking approval, still fearing rejection, forever measuring itself against an unreachable standard. 2. The terror of freedom. The unhealed wound breeds a paradox, a longing for autonomy paired with dread. You crave independence, yet each step toward it feels like betrayal. Decisions become perilous, success a disloyalty to the mother's suffering. Jung saw this as a regression to the archetypal mother's embrace, a false safety purchased at the cost of the self. The psyche clings to dependence, fearing that to stand alone is to perish. 3. The weight of ancestral guilt. A primal guilt haunts the soul. If I thrive, I abandon her. If I rise, I betray. This is not personal, but archetypal, rooted in the belief that your survival is tied to the mother's pain. Jung described it as the child carrying the mother's unlived life, her regrets, her silences, her shame, passed down like a psychic heirloom. This guilt binds you to her sorrow, dimming your light to preserve an invisible loyalty. 4. The dance of self-betrayal. The wounded soul becomes a master of self-abandonment, sacrificing needs to remain lovable. Boundaries feel like threats, saying no sparks shame. You mold yourself to please, to appease, to avoid the mother's disapproval, real or imagined. Jung saw this as the ego trapped in the child's mask, terrified to claim its own voice, forever orbiting the mother's expectations. 5. The mirror of wounded bonds. The psyche, seeking repair, draws you to relationships that echo the mother wound, partners who are distant, critical, or consuming. This is not folly, but the unconscious's attempt to heal, replaying the wound in hope of resolution. Jung noted that without awareness, these bonds become traps, mistaken for love when they are repetitions of pain. The mother's shadow lingers in every unhealed connection. 6. The void of unworthiness. I am not enough hums beneath the soul's surface, a decree born of the mother's neglect or unattainable standards. It manifests as perfectionism, shame, or joy tainted by apology. Jung recognized this as the inner child's cry, still waiting for the warmth that never came, still believing its value must be earned. This wound dims the soul's radiance, chaining it to a myth of deficiency. 7. The silenced creative flame. The mother archetype is a creator, but when wounded, creativity becomes a risk. Expression feels unsafe. The voice fears judgment. The light dreads rejection. Jung taught that the devouring mother stifles the soul's gifts, whispering that to shine is to invite abandonment. The psyche, paralyzed, buries its fire, trading authenticity for safety. 8. The body's silent plea. What the mind suppresses, the body speaks. The unhealed wound may surface as exhaustion, anxiety, or ailments that mirror the split between nurture and consumption. Jung saw these as the body's symbolic language, crying for reunion between the wounded ego and the forgotten child. These are not random pains, but invitations to heal the soul's fracture. 9. The soul's exile. At the wound's core lies a spiritual hollow, a severance from the great mother's embrace, the source of life, wisdom, and belonging. You may feel orphaned, chasing success or ecstasy to fill a void you cannot name. Jung described this as the soul's hunger for the feminine principle, a longing for reconnection with the psyche's sacred depths. This emptiness is not failure, but a call to return home. Final reflection. These echoes of the mother wound are not your shame. They are your soul's messengers, bearing the weight of what was lost, ignored, or buried. Jung did not urge us to blame the mother, but to retrieve our projections, to face the exiled self, to reclaim what was surrendered. Healing does not erase these wounds. It holds them with reverence, transforming their pain into wisdom. The child who was never seen must now become the adult who sees themselves. This is not a battle, but a reclamation, not a rebellion, but a return. Jung's words ring true. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. In the mother wound's realm, this is your map. Step forward, not with fear, but with the courage to claim your soul's truth. The path to wholeness begins here, in the light of awareness. In the sacred architecture of Jungian psychology, the shadow mother stands as both jailer and gatekeeper, a formidable force within the psyche's depths. She is not the nurturing embrace, but the devouring tide. The archetypal feminine turned inward, consuming the soul's light with control, guilt, and unspoken need. To heal the mother wound is to confront this shadow, not with weapons of blame, but with the courage of a soul seeking its own name. This is no mere therapy. It is a mythic initiation, a descent into the underworld where fear and freedom dwell as one. Jung taught that the shadow mother is not an enemy to be vanquished, but a teacher to be faced, her darkness holding the keys to your liberation. To meet her is to begin the alchemy of the self, transforming pain into power, sorrow into sovereignty. The shadow mother is the unacknowledged face of the great mother archetype, the devourer who lingers in myth as the goddess who swallows her young, the dragon guarding sacred treasure. In the psyche, she emerges as the voice that suffocates, the hand that clings, the gaze that demands obedience. She whispers, "You are ungrateful if you leave. You are selfish if you shine." Her power is subtle, cloaked in maternal language. "I only want what's best." Yet her grip is iron, forging a psychic prison where the ego remains a child tethered to her will. Jung warned that this force thrives in the unconscious, feeding on unexpressed rage, unwept grief, and the guilt of daring to be free. To ignore her is to live in her shadow, reenacting her control in relationships, sabotaging joy, and dimming the soul's fire. To face her is to reclaim what she holds hostage, your right to exist. The first step is to see her clearly without the veil of idealization or denial. This is the soul's rebellion, the act of naming the shadow mother's manipulations, her need to possess, her fear of your independence, her projection of her own wounds onto your heart. Jung called this the beginning of individuation, the moment you refuse to preserve the myth of the ever-giving mother. You must acknowledge how her control shaped your choices, how her silence taught you shame, how her unmet needs became your burden. This seeing is not betrayal, but awakening, a refusal to let her shadow rule your psyche. It requires courage, for to see her is to see the pain she caused, the child within who learned to shrink, to please, to survive by surrendering their truth. Beneath this confrontation lies a sacred fire, the rage and grief of the inner child. Jung emphasized that these emotions are not flaws, but energies of the soul, exiled by fear and conditioning. You must let the child speak, the fury of being unseen, the sorrow of a love that came with chains, the ache for a mother who could not mirror your worth. This is not regression, but resurrection, the psyche's reclaiming of what was buried. Through tears, through words, through silent screams, you make space for the soul's return. Do not fear this storm. It is the breaking of ancestral chains, the release of a grief that was never yours to carry. In this expression, the shadow mother's grip begins to loosen, her voice no longer the loudest in your mind. Jung's method of active imagination offers a bridge to this confrontation. Close your eyes and summon her image, the shadow mother, as she lives within you. She may appear as a towering figure, a suffocating presence, or a wounded creature cloaked in control. Speak to her. Ask what she fears, what she mourns, what she seeks to protect. Let her reveal her sorrow, her jealousy, her loss. This is not a battle but a dialogue, a meeting between the conscious self and the unconscious force that has shaped it. As you listen, something shifts. The ego, once a child craving her approval, becomes an adult capable of standing in truth. The shadow mother, once a tyrant, becomes a wounded archetype, distorted by generations of pain. The false split of good or evil dissolves, and wholeness begins to stir. This confrontation is a symbolic death, the end of the psychic prison she represents. Nightmares may haunt you, emotions may surge, beliefs may crumble. Jung saw this as sacred, a psychological crucifixion, mirroring the hero's descent in myth. What dies is not the mother, but the illusion that her will defines you. What rises is the soul's freedom, the feminine within, intuition, softness, joy, once feared but now reclaimed. You begin to trust the inner knowing you silenced, to express emotion without shame, to create without apology. This is the reunion with the feminine principle, a healing not just of the mother wound, but of a culture that has long exiled its depth. Ritual marks this transformation. The psyche craves ceremony to signal the shift. Write a letter to the shadow mother, pouring out your rage, your grief, your truth, then burn it in a sacred fire. Create art that speaks what words cannot. Stand in a quiet space and declare, "Your reign is over. I honor your pain, but I belong to myself." These acts are thresholds, whispers to the unconscious that the old self has died and the individuated self is born. Jung believed rituals give form to the formless, anchoring the psyche in its new truth. They are not gestures of defiance, but of devotion to the soul that has dared to awaken. As the work deepens, a quiet compassion may emerge, not for the mother's actions, but for her humanity. She becomes a woman, wounded by her own lineage, bound by her own shadows. This compassion is not obligation, but insight, freeing your heart from the weight of resentment. It allows you to breathe, to live, to love without the chains of the past. Yet compassion is not the goal. The goal is freedom, the right to stand as a sovereign self, no longer defined by the mother's gaze, but by the light within. Final reflection. To confront the shadow mother is to enter the cave where your fear and power reside. It is not an act of violence, but of love, for your truth, your soul, your right to be. Jung called this individuation the becoming of the whole self. It begins with a rupture, moves through grief, and culminates in rebirth. There is no awakening without pain, but beyond the pain is your freedom, to live not in reaction to the past, but in service to the self. The shadow mother is not your enemy. She is your initiation. Face her, and the door to your soul swings open. In the sacred forge of Jungian psychology, the healing of the mother wound does not kneel before the altar of forgiveness. It rises instead on the wings of liberation, a fierce and quiet revolution of the soul. Carl Jung did not crown forgiveness as the pinnacle of individuation, for he knew that true transformation begins not with moral duty, but with a raw descent into the heart of the wound. To heal is to face, unflinching, the full weight of the pain carved by the hands that were meant to cradle. It is to honor the truth of what was lost, to speak the unsaid, to feel the forbidden. Forgiveness, if it comes, is not a mandate, but a shadow that trails the deeper light of a soul reclaimed. Jung cautioned that to rush toward forgiveness is to risk betrayal, not of the mother, but of the self. Society, with its hymns of virtue, often demands forgiveness as a badge of healing, a performance of grace to soothe the collective gaze. But Jung saw this haste as a veil, a bypassing of the psyche's sacred fire. When forgiveness is offered too soon, born of guilt, spiritual obligation, or fear of being seen as broken, it becomes a mask over unvoiced rage, unwept grief, and unacknowledged betrayal. In this guise, it serves the mother complex, reinforcing the old script that your truth must be silenced to preserve peace. This is not freedom. It is suppression, a deferral of the soul's right to breathe. To heal, you must first allow the exiled voices to rise, the fury of the child unseen, the sorrow of the heart unmet, the longing for a mother who could not give what your soul required. Jung called this not regression, but resurrection, the awakening of a self that refuses to shrink for approval. This work begins in the crucible of truth. You must grieve the mother you never had, the one whose arms were not a sanctuary, but a mirror of her own wounds. You must rage against the control that dimmed your light, the expectations that bound your voice, the love that came with strings. This is not an attack on the mother, but an emancipation of the soul, a refusal to carry her pain as your own. Jung taught that to feel these truths is to break the spell of the mother complex, to dismantle the psychic prison where the child within still waits for permission to exist. Do not fear this storm. It is the psyche's cleansing fire, burning away the illusions that kept you small. In its wake, a clarity emerges. The mother is neither angel nor monster, but human, a vessel of her own unresolved grief, her own unlived life. To see the mother as human is to collapse the projections that once gave her power. She is no longer the eternal nurturer or the devouring shadow, but a woman shaped by her own wounds, her own lineage, her own struggles. This act of humanization is not absolution. It is liberation. It frees you from the myth that her love was the measure of your worth, that her flaws were your failing. In this space of truth, after the rage, after the tears, forgiveness may stir, but it is not required. Jung insisted that integration, not reconciliation, is the goal. You must gather the fragments of your soul, voice, feeling, power, softness, and weave them back into the fabric of your being. This is the work of individuation, the sacred act of becoming whole, not by erasing the past, but by refusing to be its prisoner. Integration means drawing boundaries, not to punish, but to protect. These are not walls, but sacred lines, declarations that your inner landscape is no longer ruled by the mother's image. You say no to guilt that demands your silence, no to shame that questions your worth, no to roles that ask you to betray your truth. These boundaries are not rebellion, but sovereignty, the right to exist as a self, not a shadow. They guard the space where your soul can breathe, where your choices reflect your essence rather than inherited fear. Jung saw this as the ego's awakening, no longer a child seeking approval, but an adult who trusts their own light. And if forgiveness comes, it is not a ceremony for others. It is a quiet unfolding, a byproduct of a heart no longer chained to bitterness. It arises not from obligation, but from the rootedness of a sovereign soul, one that no longer needs external resolution to be whole. Yet even without forgiveness, freedom is yours. This is the radical truth. You do not need to forgive to heal. You need only to reclaim the parts of yourself once surrendered, to speak the truths once buried, to love the self once abandoned. This is not about reconciling with the mother, but about reconciling with your own soul, about standing in the world not as a child, but as a creator of meaning. The mother wound, once a silent dictator, becomes a teacher in this light. Its pain is not punishment, but initiation, a call to awaken from the dream of unworthiness. Jung wrote, "Only by accepting the shadow can one overcome it." In the realm of the mother complex, this means no longer waiting for forgiveness to set you free. It means rising now, claiming your voice, your power, your right to exist. You are not here to edit your truth for love, to mute your instincts for connection, to shrink for the illusion of peace. You are here to live, to choose, to forge a path that honors the soul you have reclaimed. Final reflection. Liberation is not a finish line, but a beginning. The moment you step out of the mother's shadow and into your own light, it is the courage to feel without shame, to speak without fear, to love without condition. Jung's wisdom reminds us that the soul's freedom is not earned through forgiveness, but claimed through clarity. You are not bound to the past. You are the one who writes the future, the one who carries the flame of a self unchained. Step forward now, not later, not when it's safe, but now. The psyche awaits your truth, and the world awaits your wholeness. The healing of the mother wound is not a quiet resolution, but a seismic shift, a crossing into a life no longer bound by the invisible chains of the past. In the realm of Jungian depth psychology, this is not merely recovery, it is metamorphosis. The self, once shaped by survival, silence, and the weight of ancestral sorrow, dissolves in the crucible of conscious confrontation. From its ashes rises a new being, not the child who once cowered, but the adult who claims their soul's authority. This is the sacred rebirth, the moment when the mother wound, once a prison, becomes a portal to wholeness. Jung taught that true individuation requires this death and resurrection, a shedding of the false self to uncover the blueprint of who you were always meant to be. The unraveling begins in darkness. As the grip of the mother complex loosens, the scaffolding of the ego, built on pleasing, performing, and preserving the family myth, begins to fracture. This is the alchemical nigredo, the blackening, where old certainties crumble. You may feel adrift, as if the center of your being has vanished. Former values seem hollow. Relationships falter, and purpose slips through your fingers like sand. Jung warned that this disorientation is sacred, a necessary void where the old must die to make way for the gold hidden within. Do not fear this emptiness. It is the womb of the psyche, the space where the sovereign self begins to stir, no longer tethered to the mother's imagined gaze, but guided by the quiet pulse of inner truth. What emerges from this underworld is not a polished self, but a grounded one, breathing freely for the first time. This reborn adult does not seek rescue or validation from the external world. They parent themselves, offering the nurture once withheld, the boundaries once feared, the love once conditional. Self-care becomes a living ritual. Rest is sacred, Emotions are honored without shame, and choices are made not to appease, but to align. Jung described this as the awakening of the sovereign, the self that lives from its own center, unswayed by guilt or longing. This self does not perform for applause, but expresses the truth of its being, rewriting the inner myth that once dictated unworthiness. The old narrative, "I must sacrifice to be loved, I am never enough unless I earn it," must be unbound from the psyche. In its place, a new myth takes root, one forged not in reaction to the mother's pain, but in reverence for your own essence. This is no small act. Jung saw it as a sacred rite, the individual stepping out of the family's unspoken tragedy to become the author of a new symbolic life. You are no longer the echo of your mother's unlived dreams, the carrier of her shame, or the protector of her silence. You are the one who dares to live, to speak, to create from a place of wonder rather than wounding. This rewriting is not rebellion but devotion, a commitment to the soul's unfolding. With rebirth comes the necessity of boundaries, not as punishment, but as protection. The external mother, if still present, must be met with clarity, a gentle but firm declaration of selfhood. The internal mother, her voice of doubt or control, must be recognized and disempowered, her whispers no longer mistaken for truth. Jung emphasized that boundaries are not severances of love, but affirmations of the self, psychic lines that guard the hard-earned terrain of your being. They prevent regression, ensuring the adult does not collapse back into the child's role. To draw these lines is to honor the journey, to say, "I am no longer yours to define." A profound shift occurs when the need for external nurturing is withdrawn and rooted inward. Here, the archetypal mother is reclaimed, not as a figure of judgment, but as a wellspring of intuition, softness, and care. The feminine principle, once feared or exiled, returns as wisdom in motion. You begin to trust the inner knowing you, once silenced, to embrace emotion without apology, to move through the world with a gentleness that is not weakness, but strength. Self-parenting becomes a daily practice, a kind word to the inner child, a moment of stillness, a refusal to betray your truth for approval. Jung saw this as the reintegration of the feminine, a reunion with the soul's depth that restores balance to a psyche long tilted toward control or rationality. You stand now at the edge of a sacred threshold where the mother wound, once a silent monarch in the depths of your psyche, has been met, not with resentment, but with the fierce clarity of a soul reclaiming its birthright. This is not the end of a journey, but the beginning of a new myth, one you write with your own hand, unburdened by the shadows of the past. In the crucible of this work, you have not merely healed, you have transformed. The mother, once an archetype looming larger than life, has been stripped of her mythic power. She is no longer goddess or devourer, but human, flawed, and finite. Her voice, once a dictator whispering shame or guilt, has softened into an echo you no longer obey. This is the alchemy of Jung's vision: to descend into the underworld of the unconscious, to mourn the unlived lives you carried, and to rise as the sovereign self, no longer tethered to inherited sorrow. This rebirth is not a return to a self untouched by pain. It is the awakening of the one you were always meant to be, a soul that breathes without apology, that creates without fear, that loves from a wellspring of wholeness rather than a void of lack. The mother wound, once a chain forged in the fires of unmet needs and ancestral grief, has become a mirror reflecting your courage. You have faced the dragon of the shadow mother, not to slay her, but to retrieve what she guarded, the right to exist, to feel, to speak, to become. Jung taught that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. In this moment, you are no longer the child pleading for permission, the orphan seeking a gaze that never came. You are the adult who sees, who chooses, who walks with the quiet authority of one who has claimed their own soul. Yet this transformation is not yours alone. To heal the mother wound is to break an ancient spell, to sever the invisible threads that wove pain through generations. You become a conscious ancestor, one who does not pass on the weight of unlived dreams or unspoken grief, but offers instead a legacy of freedom, creativity, and truth. Your healing is a silent revolution, a ripple that touches not only your heart, but the hearts of those yet to come. You are the one who says, "This story ends with me, and a new one begins." This is the deeper gift, to stand as a beacon for your lineage, to redeem not only your soul, but the soul of the collective, to birth a new way of being that honors both the light and the shadow. Pause now and feel the weight of this moment. Let it settle into your bones. If a single phrase in this journey has stirred your depths, if a fleeting image has mirrored the quiet ache of your inner child, let your voice rise. Share your story in the space below, not because it is complete, but because it is alive, pulsing with the raw truth of your becoming. Have you glimpsed the sovereign self, the one who no longer orbits the mother's imagined gaze? Or are you still wandering the sacred forest of the psyche, seeking the path to your own light? Your words, however fragile, may become a lantern for another, a signpost for someone lost in the labyrinth of their own wound. Your story is not just yours. It is a thread in the tapestry of human awakening. If you know someone carrying the silent burden of the mother wound, someone who believes love demands the sacrifice of the soul, that peace is a debt they cannot pay. Share this message with them. Let them know that true connection does not ask for self-betrayal. Let them remember that the most vital union is the one forged within, with the self that has always been waiting to be claimed. This is not a call to perfection, but to presence, to the sacred labor of becoming whole. Reach out to those who need to hear that they are enough, that their truth is not a burden, but a gift, that their healing is a revolution in itself. Before you turn away, I invite you to join this journey further. Subscribe to this space, activate the bell, and step into a community that dares to venture beneath the surface, where we explore the hidden architecture of the psyche, the whispers of the unconscious, and the mirrors of our relationships. This is a place where the soul's questions are not dismissed, but honored, where the wounds we carry are not shamed, but illuminated. If a question burns within you, if a wound or wonder seeks light, leave it below. Your voice is not just welcome, it is essential. This space breathes because of you, because of the courage you bring to the work of remembering who you are. Thank you for showing up, not only to these words, but to the sacred task of your own becoming. Know this: when the soul meets its truth, it does not falter, it rests. Until that moment, let your deepest love be the one you cultivate within. That is the root. That is the home. From that wholeness, all that is real will bloom. You are not here to shrink, to perform, or to earn your place. You are here to live, to create, to love with the fullness of a heart unchained. Until we meet again, walk gently on the path, carrying the light you have forged in the darkness. This is not the end, but a beginning. The mother wound, once a prison, has become a portal. Step through it. The world awaits the truth of who you are. The psyche awaits the myth you will write, and the soul awaits the home you will build within. Go now, not as a child, but as a sovereign, not as a shadow, but as a flame. The page is blank, and the pen is yours.